Greetings and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. We are back for season 5 and we have missed you and we hope that you've missed us. We really needed this break, and from what I'm seeing and hearing, it allowed many of you time to look at our past episodes. So we do thank you for that. So we at Wellness Wednesday bridge technology with financial and mental well-being. Our season is going to be fabulous. So we're telling you right now, we want you here every Wednesday without fail. We love it when you put information in the chat. We love your questions and your comments. We're asking you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you will know when we go live on Wednesdays. So we've got a great season, as I've said, I think for the third time. We're dealing with somatics, survival, as always, prosperity, and technology. Our guest tonight is Dr. Desjamebra Robinson, and we're doing a two-parter. So let me ask this question. What if prosperity doesn't begin with money, but with healing? We're exploring that for the rest of January. Our guest tonight is a womanist theologian. She's a healer, and she's a transformational leader. She specializes in healing spiritual trauma, somatic illness, and generational wounds. Dr. Robinson is the author of I Hope This Helps Someone, a Womanist Response to Spiritual and Psychological Trauma. She's also the founder of the Womanist Collective Inc. and an ordained preacher and clinical pastor. And believe me, you will want to check out her website for her sermons and her blog posts. So without further ado, we're going to bring Dr. Robinson, Dr. DJ Robinson, Dr. Desjamebra Robinson to the stage. Greetings.
Greetings to you. I'm so glad to be here with you all. Hello, good evening, disruptors. I'm so glad to be here tonight. And thank you for that powerful introduction. I just want to talk to you tonight about a journey, and that's pretty much it. We want to take this time to talk about our journey from just merely surviving to walking in true sovereignty. So we don't want to make you too uncomfortable, but we do need to have this uncomfortable conversation about why so many of us are stuck in a place of survival mode, right? The phase that, when we are in survival mode, it affects everything that we do. It affects our lifestyle. It affects our bank accounts. It affects how we govern, especially as women, how we govern our families, how we rear our children. And so we have to take this conversation very seriously. And so what I'm here to do tonight is introduce you to a concept or a framework that I call somatic theology. And whenever we get ready to bring up the slides, I'll be ready for you all. Before I even get into talking about what we're talking about tonight, or even introducing myself, I need everyone to just roll their shoulders back so that we can get to a place where we are relaxed, where we are thinking about what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? Thank you so much. So in our presentation for Disruptor DAO, I actually put this together for you all, for all of the disruptors out there, and for those of us who are even trying to find ourselves in this timeline by the divine. We're trying to find where is our spiritual and psychological location. When we talk about theology, we often talk about the spirit, we talk about the mind, but we often leave the body out. And so when you talk about somatic theology, you want to look at the soma, the soma, right? You don't want to leave the soma out of the conversation. And I'll probably mention this again. The soma actually means body. The mistake that we often make is that we focus so much on trying to save the spirit. Everyone, especially if you are, a part of the Black church or any type of faith-based, type religion, if you're into Pentecostalism, it's like, we want to be saved and sanctified and filled with the Holy Ghost, right? Yes, you want that, but at the same time, your nervous system is operating on a completely different frequency. And so we have to bridge that gap tonight. We have to put that together tonight, because if we don't bridge that gap, what ends up happening is we have this bipolarism in the spiritual realm. And that's where I do a lot of my clinical studies, or a lot of my studies based in psycho-spiritual theology, and, talking about the trauma that happens that way. So we're going to bridge that gap tonight. So the next thing I want you to do is I want to talk to you about inherited trauma and how it actually lives in the body. And I had to take this into consideration for myself as well, because I've had some issues in my own life where I had to, I felt like these sudden waves of panic. And I'm sure that many of you have probably felt this at least once or twice in your life. I don't know, keep on living. It'll happen sooner or later. But if you feel like sometimes these sudden waves of panic, or like a deep exhaustion, an impulse. I definitely know that many of us have these impulses to hoard, not hoard just things, right? But hoard resources, hoard relationships, hoard things, keep things, because you're trapped in this survival mode and you really don't know where it's coming from. It's a mode of thinking that there are not enough resources for me, and I have to hold on to everything that I put my hands on. One of the things I say in my book is that there's no greater burden than a tool in your tool bag that's no longer useful. And so a lot of times when we hoard things, sometimes we're keeping tools that are not useful for us anymore. They worked for a season, but now that we're building in a different area of our lives, those tools don't work and we're carrying them around. And what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to judge yourself for it. I want us to realize it, embrace it, and realize what we need to do with some of these tools. A lot of times when we try to exercise our religious practices, when they stop working for us, when those control mechanisms don't work anymore, we start to condemn ourselves, and we say, oh, well, I just need more faith. I need to work harder. I need to do this. I need to do that. And sometimes even religiosity can inform us, and then we'll start to judge and condemn ourselves. I don't want you to do that to yourself tonight. You need to realize it may not be you. It may be your history informing the narrative. And that's why we talk about the inherited trauma. So when you look at me, you can see, if you see a picture of my grandparents, if you see a picture on both sides, if you see a picture of my mother, you see a picture of my father, you'll see, oh, she gets those high cheekbones from her. She gets her nose from her grandfather, or she gets, these different features, from her ancestors. And so you can actually see physically on the outside where I get a lot of the traits. But at the same time, when you look at, when you look at the inside, a lot of people can't see that. You can see how I respond to certain situations. And then sometimes I don't even know where it's from. And so what I'm trying to articulate here to you is that, we can inherit height and weight and physical attributes, but we also have to realize that we are also inheriting psychological attributes, psychological genetics. We have other things that we are inheriting that inform us on how we live out our lives right now, how we manage our money, how we raise our children, whether or not we raise them in a state of fear, how we practice our faith. Right? These are things that are genetically passed down to us, and it's called genetic memory. It is actually biology. Somatic theology is actually about biology more than it is about spirituality. And so if your grandmother lived in a state of terror, like with the Jim Crow, then, you know, surviving poverty, surviving abuse, if someone in your timeline was raped or any of that things, their bodies adapted or adopted some type of mechanism of survival skills. And guess what? Those survival skills were passed down to you. And so it's almost like a Russian doll. You ever seen those Russian dolls where you have the big one, and then you open it up, and then there's another one, and then you open it up, there's another one, there's another one. And so that is kind of how I want to describe this today, as far as how we respond to traumatic situations. Now, I do want to take a pivot here and tell you that I learned through Desjamebra J that trauma does not happen to you. Traumatic situations happen in life. So if you're a Bible reader, you know, you will know that there are scriptures that says that Jesus of Nazareth says to his disciples, in this life, you will have trouble. You will have traumatic situations that will happen to you. How you respond to them is based on what is informing your narrative. Is it you, or is it your history? And these are the questions that you want to ask yourself before that. So when you feel like you're crazy, you are not crazy. You are actually just being loyal to a narrative or to a history of survival that you have not lived in this lifetime, but it has been lived in your germline. It's been lived in your germline. So let's keep moving, because I want to make sure that we do well on the time. So what is somatic theology? There's a scripture in the biblical text that says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. But I want to say your spirit is willing, but your cells are remembering, right? So in the clinic, there's something different. You see powerful, brilliant, intelligent, faithful people who are actually stuck. And one of the things that I do use to help me understand that stuck position in my book, I hope this helps someone. I refer to Walter Brueggemann in his Message of the Psalms, where he says that we go through phases of orientation, disorientation, and then reorientation. And it's a complex cycle, right? And it spirals upwards or upward or downward as we continue to progress through life. We are constantly going through this cycle of orientation, disorientation, new orientation. So some people get stuck in that phase of disorientation. And so your cells are actually remembering the disorientation, and we can get stuck in those flashbacks, right? We can get stuck in those biological flashbacks. And because our minds are not really able to tell whether or not we're living a reality or something that we made up, then what ends up happening is we can really get caught in a cycle of intrusive thoughts, intrusive thinking, and we can start making stories, making movies up in our head and living those movies out in real time, and they don't even match our current reality. So again, soma is the Greek word for body. Theology is the study of God. So somatic theology actually forms itself to say how the study of God and how trauma actually lives in our physical tissue. So I could get into fasciitis, I could get into the hippocampus. We're not going to do that tonight, but definitely drop your questions in the comment box. And then, of course, visit the website if you have any questions. I definitely love to blog about this kind of stuff. So the understanding about somatic theology is that you cannot pray away your nervous system. So no matter how much religion or doctrine tries to inform your narrative, you must do some different techniques. You have to use some different tools to bring your nervous system down. Remember, we are here's where our scriptures come in. If you're Bible readers, it says you must bring your flesh into submission to the things of God. And so by doing that, what that translates to is that the anxiety that is actually in your biology, you have to bring that under submission to reality and to actually acknowledging the true nature of what is happening and where is it coming from, how are you responding, and moving forward from that. And it takes a discipline. So even if you're there's a book that's out there that's called Your Body Keeps the Score. So even if you have forgiven people who have violated you, even if you have forgiven and released them, you understand, don't forget that your body does not, your cell, it is embedded in your cells. That memory is embedded in your cells. Your body does keep the score. And I guess until we really truly inform our bodies of what the next steps are, then we end up basically being at war with ourselves, because there's nothing outside of you that you can control, but the inside of you can. And if we don't inform ourselves or give us the appropriate information, if we don't dig into the history of our ancestors, what we have gone through, and truly inform and embrace. I'm not telling you to get rid of the ghosts. I'm just telling you, don't let them run rampant through the house, right? If we don't embrace the fact that they are there and do the right thing, and I allude to, and I'll probably allude to this again in with Audre Lorde, AUDRE LORDE, she says that we must metabolize the pain. And so if we don't take these things in and actually turn it into fuel, it can actually begin to calcify. And that's where I go into some of my writings about institutional strokes and about how those other things happen. And we might get into that tonight. So I'm ready for it. So basically, so I hope I've touched enough on somatic theology to let you know that the soma is the body and the theology is the study of God. Just remember that no matter what you have done psychologically, don't forget that your body does hold the score, and we have to inform the body just as well as we inform the spirit. So those ghosts that I was talking about, those ghosts that we were talking about, we have to realize whether or not they are hellish or holy. So a lot of times religion tries to inform us on how to deal with sin, quote unquote, whatever that is, which actually means to miss the mark. Anything that is distracting you enough to keep you from doing what your purpose in life is. In the divine timing of the divine creator, we only have a snippet, right, of life. And so we have to do the best we can with that period of time. And so with that, we have to know that these are what we call epigenetics. Okay, so epigenetics is the DNA's hardware. It's the hardware that that doesn't change very much, right? And so the DNA is the hardware. The epigenetics is the software. So for those of you who are computer savvy, it's the operating system. And so epigenetics deals with the chemical markers that sit on top of your DNA. It switches your DNA on or off based on your environment. And so I wrote some things about that that helped me to understand that we have, like, I was downstairs. I'll give you a quick story. I was downstairs. We had lost power here in where I live in upstate New York. And so we had lost power. And so I had to go downstairs and reset the circuit breaker. And so sometimes when something happens, it can turn off the lights in just one isolated place. But then when you lose power, or if you overload the entire grid, you have to go and you have to reset the entire breaker box. Well, that's what we look at as far as epigenetics are concerned. Based on the environment that we live in, the way that my mother handled trauma and the way that my father handled trauma, there's a switch on my DNA. And so there might be on for my mom and then off for my dad, or vice versa. And so you have to really go through and see what switches are on, what switches are off, on how you are going to respond to trauma. And that takes discipline. This is what we're talking about today. Going through these things. Is it the history informing me? Is it my own history? How do I shut that off for my future generations? How do I keep my daughter or my son or my children from taking on these same inherited behaviors, right? To deal with these things? How do I give them new tools? How do I do the circuit breaker? How do I replace it? How do I change the voltage of what it can actually handle? So I hope that's a good analogy for us. But when you look at those things, and when we start to look at, us living through COVID, us living through the AIDS epidemic, us living through the drug epidemic and heroin and civil war and everything, our ancestors, through that there was a switch, there was a gene that was switched on or switched off, and it was passed down. And so if your ancestors were in a war zone, their epigenetics switched on hypervigilance, right? So the question is, these ghosts, and I say these ghosts because I don't want them running rampant in our houses, and I mean the houses in our mind, but these memories, these ghosts, sometimes they can set you in a place of hell, or they can set you in a place of holiness. You have to choose and go through that circuit breaker box and turn them on or turn them off, and find ways to flip that switch so that you can heal yourself. And then now you can start the healing process for the generations that are coming. The reason why I say that is because I realized in my studies that trauma is passed the same way addiction is. And addiction can be passed to the third and the fourth generation. So trauma can be passed to the third and the fourth generation, but the same way you can also pass healing, right? And so we have to get into that. So if you are in a place where you're feeling that you have to make a decision, you do have to make a decision. Is this hellish? Are you going to live in hell? Or are you going to live in a place of holiness, right? That's just how it is. And so let's keep moving. The next one, I hope this is the right one. Let me just go back. Yep. Okay. And so my next slide is about the spiritual redlining. So when you get to a place where you realize, okay, whatever battles that I'm fighting that I didn't start, whatever anxieties that I'm having, or some type of memory that is triggering something in my relationship, at my job, in my family dynamics, the way that I interpret reality, when I realize that my system has crashed, you have to take an inventory of how it has crashed, right? So this is how you do the diagnosis. If you are running old software, if you're running old tools, if your circuit breaker box is from 1930, right, and you have not upgraded your thinking, if you have not upgraded your way of coping mechanisms and informed yourself, not only just psychologically, but biologically, that also comes into eating the right foods, right? Eating the right foods, putting the right materials, listening to the right music, the right type of vibrations. When you start to get all of that stuff together, what ends up happening is you begin to compartmentalize things. So one of the three of the things that happen in spiritual redlining or systemic redlining is when trauma denies your body the resources of rest and safety and peace. Okay. When we realize that we're living in states of hypervigilance, dissociation, and chronic fatigue, we have redlined ourselves. And so what ends up happening is we have stagnated and gotten stuck. But the thing about it is, no one else is doing this to us. We're doing it to ourselves, right? When you find yourself in these places, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how much you pray. You have to be able to access peace in your own home, in your own mind. So the spiritual redlining shows up in hypervigilance, which is if you are always scanning the room, you can't sit with your back to the door. You think someone's always coming in. Remember, is this you or your history that is informing this? You have to do the research. You have to look into that. Dissociation, you're driving home, forget how you got there. I mean, you just completely check out. And then you have chronic fatigue. And this is a big one because you really aren't tired because you worked hard. You're tired because your nervous system has been in this state of like with the circuit breaker box, your nervous system has been in this state of overload, just enough before it snaps, but just enough to drain your energy. And so you want to make sure that you look at these things and you see yourself. If you see yourself in these places, hypervigilance, dissociation, and chronic fatigue, you want to just learn to stop and take a breath. Because a lot of times what we do is in clinical studies is we recenter. We say, you know, I'm here right now. This is not my ancestors. This is not 1930. I'm not in a war zone. I am not being abused in this moment. And you want to breathe in your breath and breathe in your life and breathe in the divine so that you can realize that, you know what, there is no threat. Because what happens with this somatic theology, and when we look at the germline, when we look at the trauma, a lot of times what it does is it informs the reality, and it's a total disconnect. So the first step to sovereignty is realizing that whatever is happening or had happened in your life or in the generations of your life is not happening now. We have to find ways to inform ourselves of how to use that information. We don't throw the information away, but we definitely need to know how to use the information. And so the circuit breaker is metabolizing the trauma. How am I going to digest this information? And sometimes you need to do that with someone clinical. Sometimes I'm going to be honest, some spiritual leaders may be able to guide, but it's going to take way more than sweating and praying at the altar. We really have to use the work with the tools that we have accessible to us: journaling, writing, researching, naming, right? If you cannot name it, you cannot deal with it, right? If you don't know that this is something historical, or that it is a germline issue, or that it is genetic memory, that this is something, this did not happen in my life, but it happened to my mother, my father, my grandfather, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, you know, someone that is directly connected. When we realize that, now we can say, oh, that's where that's coming from. Let's deal with it. We're not going to let these ghosts, we're not going to let these intrusive thoughts and these genetic memories run rampant in our house and in our realities right now. So I want to give time for question and answers at this point, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's almost 8. But we have to go, and my challenge to you, disruptors, is to look at your psychological and spiritual circuit breaker, right, in your house, in the housing of your mind, and go and find whether or not the voltage matches the room, right? I hope that makes sense. But whether or not the voltage on the breaker matches the outlets in the room. Because if you plug up too many things in that one room, you can flip the switch and then there's a crash, right? So I hope that makes sense. And then this is where we begin the next work. We have to, and again, Audre Lorde talks a lot about in her writings, metabolizing the pain, making it productive for you. Going down and saying, you know what, this fuse is old. It's been working overtime. We need to get the master electrician and get some information and get the right fuses in the right capacity and get the right tools to change out this fuse and to get ourselves operating at the appropriate voltage for the vibrations of our reality. So I'm going to pass it back. Let me just make sure I don't have any more slides. Nope, that's it. We're going to do part 2, and we'll talk about the healing process. Now that we have all of this information, it's yes, but how? So come back next week and we'll talk a little bit more about how, and give you some techniques, some practical techniques that you can actually use that will help. All right.
This has been such a great conversation, and it's really needed. You talked about the work of Audre Lorde. You talked about the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm familiar with both of those. Um, I'm going to check in a moment for comments and questions. Okay,
Okay.
see, now you got me because I can't even talk.
It's a lot to metabolize. It's a lot to take in. So I encourage your disruptors, go back, read, rewatch, get your questions ready, send them in. I will put up on my website, a few blogs this week that will help us, if that'll help, right? About metabolizing pain. And then also about the circuit breaker, right? I think I want to do those too. I think I'll blog a little bit this week about that.
So, in terms of chronic fatigue, what I'm noticing, or just fatigue, what I'm noticing online and in written works is that rest and renewal are huge discussions in the
Right.
past few years because people are I'm going to use the word insane because their worlds are colliding with perhaps their past worlds. They don't know what's going on. All they know is that they're tired and
Right.
life is just too much. And so this conversation really fits into those thoughts. But here's my question.
Okay.
Because our memories are embedded in ourselves, including all of our past traumas, our ancestral traumas, and the things that are happening to us on a daily basis.
Right.
Some people refer to all of this as keeping your head on a swivel because you never know what's coming around the corner. So, when I think about this, I think it causes us to be at war with ourselves and others. And like you said, if you're not able, or if you haven't found a way to control yourself or heal yourself, you could snap back at any given moment. And a lot of people, sometimes myself included, may not take that break to breathe, take one or two breaths before responding. So, with all of that, how do we deal with church folk that simply won't believe this because they feel it's not biblical?
Let them. When we say church folk, and I want to make sure I say to the Black church, is that one of the first scripture that pops in my mind just on that is that Jesus of Nazareth came, and all of his responses to the people who had doubts of his journey of what, because we also have to look at Jesus's genetic trauma, right? They tried to stone his mom while he was in the womb. Like that, nobody looks at that part.
No.
They tried to kill his mom while she was pregnant with him. Like that is anxiety. That if that wasn't in his mind, right? If you even look at when they do the genealogy, I don't want to get off too far, but just for those who are Bible scholars, when they do the genealogy of Jesus, and you see that he came through Tamar, who was with Judah, not the Tamar of David, but the Tamar of Judah in Genesis chapter 38. When you start to see the germline of Jesus, and you see all of the traumatic things that happen when you talk about who was it at AI, the prostitute, what was it? I can't remember.
It's not Ripsa. No.
It starts with an R, I think. But you know who I'm talking. Rahab, right? Was it Rahab? The prostitute at AI when Joshua and Caleb went and took over and the walls came tumbling down and they went around the city 7 times. Somebody help me look that up because I'm switching pathways now. But the prostitute is also a part of Jesus's germline. But guess what? She survived a takeover of her city by a bunch of people from the wilderness, right? And so she survived, there was a terrorized, something happened there. And so when you think about the germline, so with people that won't accept, let me get back to where I was going. When people won't accept what you are doing in your form of healing, your response is what Jesus of Nazareth said to all of his critics. I am here to be about my Father's business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not here to help you heal. If you can follow me, follow, right? Even Paul said in the scriptures, follow me as I follow Christ. For me, as a womanist theologian, Christ is more about a movement and a mindset than it is about a person, especially in womanist theology. There's no gender on Christ, right? Jesus, we respect as a man in the flesh. He came, you understand what I'm saying? And his gender was, XY chromosome, right? So we respect that. But when you think about it, Christ as being a mindset in the movement, let this mind be in you that was also in Christ. That is your own personal journey that you must do. And this is your job, is to work out your own soul salvation. And I'll give this to you. Oh my gosh, I'm freestyling so bad. And so one of the things that I talked about, and I think it's in Matthew, I'll have to look it up, but if you want to look it up, whoever's on behind Matthew, when it's the parable of the talents, it's the parable of the talents. And I try to break this down very, very good for people and get them to think about it in a different way. The beginning portion of that story says that the master came and he, first of all, he called his servants to him. So in order to do this work, you must be called to it. And he called his servants to him, and he gave them a talent, or he gave them based on what he knew they could do with it. To one, he gave 5, to one, he gave 2, to one, he gave 1, based on their ability, based on the tools that they had. And so all their job was to do something with what the best they could with what they were given. So that when the master comes back to see, hey, show me what you got. What did you do? Right? One said, hey, look, I made 5 more. The other one said, he said, hey, I'm proud of you. You did a good job. You did exactly what I knew that you could do. Right? Because God knows what we can do. Mm-hmm. And then the one that had 2, he said, hey, I didn't get 5, but I got 2. He said, come and share in your master's joy. Because first of all, I called you. I knew what you could do with it. And I gave it to you to see if you were going to do the work. Right? And then the last one says, well, I buried it in the ground. I didn't do anything with the information. I didn't do anything with the seminar. I didn't do anything. And he said, you could have at least told somebody else about it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You did absolutely nothing with it, which means you did not work, right? You did not work. And what we want to be as believers of God, as believers of the way, what we want to be is found working and not exhausting ourselves working, but continuously progressing, even little by little, whether it's 5, 2, or 1, keep working at it. Right? Don't. And I had a conversation with a therapist the other day, and I'm starting to change my vocabulary and change my language, because I would say, well, I'm trying. And she says, trying is one thing, but working is a different thing. And so now we want to be found not trying. We want to be found working. Yes. Even if it's a little bit by a little bit.
Or doing.
Answer, yeah, or doing. Whatever you can, whatever your hand does find to do. Do it heartedly as unto God and not as unto man. You're not doing this for other people. That's what I would say to the people of the church, in the Black church. You're not doing this for other people. It doesn't mean be selfish. I'm not telling anyone to be selfish and self-serving. What I am saying is, though, that this is your journey. You have to answer for what you did with the talent that God gave you. And he called you to it, right? So I hope that's enough. That is.
And don't worry about it. That when I was very young, I will say that scripture not shook me, but I had a hard time understanding it. And it was when I looked at the word talent. that I was able to, because I always feel you need to be carrying a concordance, and a dictionary and some other things when you're reading scripture.
Right.
So there's another question. And
Okay.
she said, I've had a theory. Black folks do not know how to swim at the same level as white folks may have, because it's the root of trauma of the Middle Passage, watching their brethren be tossed over, eat and take their own lives. And she says she's curious about your thoughts about this.
My immediate thought is that some were tossed and others jumped. And so some were tossed and others jumped, because of the refusal to succumb to a systemic, to a mindset, right? That was being, you got to remember. So what I think she's talking about, the passage from Africa or to on a boat. Have you been on a cruise? Like, I got sick after 5 days. I was like, I don't want to be on this boat no more. I'm ready to go home. I'm ready, I'm ready to somebody come get the helicopter or something, get me off this boat. I went on a cruise for 5 days and I was like, I'm tired of looking at water. But not to be funny, but what I'm saying is just imagining now how many days, months, it took for that passage to happen. There were some who refused to come to this shoreline with that trauma in their mind. There was a lot of stuff that happened on those ships. There was a lot of traumatic injury that happened. So those who survived it came to this side with all of that genetic memory, and it takes generations upon generations. But here's the thing: if the conditions never change, that switch in the circuit breaker never gets turned off. So we're re-traumatized every round, every three to four generations, something happens. Slavery happens every 3 to 4 generations. The Jim Crow happens every 3 to 4 generations. So when we start to look at our history, we start to see this repetitive cycle of systemic trauma. And so with those, remember, there were some that were tossed, but then there were some who jumped. There were some who refused. And in principle, they refused to take on that mindset. And so if it meant not only just their physical death, but for us now today, if it means that we psychologically have to say, I'm leaving this ship, I'm not going to stay on this boat and continue to be traumatized by these circumstances anymore. I'd rather take a chance swimming than I would, you understand what I'm saying, to live in this state of hypervigilance or live in this state of dissonance, right? I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I got what you're saying, because when you start to look at the 50s, the 60s, when pools were segregated.
Right.
No. Pools were for white people because we didn't have pools. We might have the beach or the sea, but we really didn't have pools. Probably until the 70s in different communities.
From segregation.
So yeah. So we were locked out. However, there is a book called Undercurrents of Power.
Okay.
Aquatic culture in the African diaspora, and I'm putting it in the chat.
Okay.
And it talks about who West Africans were as sea people.
Right.
And it was the Europeans that saw them. And then there are pictures in this book as well that show us being masterful on rowboats in the sea. So when you mentioned people who jumped, they probably thought that they would swim back home. In terms of the Igbo people who came, I think it was to Virginia, and they determined that they were going to walk back home.
Right.
It could have been because of those skills. So there's a lot in that.
There's a lot in that. There's a lot of, thank you for that. I think I probably almost missed what the commenter was saying as far as physically being able to swim. But I want to say psychologically, and there's got to be a mindset first before it manifests in your body, right? It's got to be a mindset, like you said. There were some skills. There was something in their genetic memory that said, if we jump off this boat, we can make it. You know, if we walk long enough, we can make it. We can get out of here. I think there's even another part in our historical timeline where I think we tried to make that journey back home as a people. I'll have to look it up again, but I know that in our history, there was a group of Blacks that wanted to get together and go back to Africa, right? And we were like, we're leaving. We don't want to be here. There's something that triggered. There was something in the circuit breaker that triggered that said, you know what? We can do this. We can do this. And one of the things I want to introduce to your disruptors is that there's a systemic germline reprogramming, not just in us as an individual, but us as a group. And we have to have some levels. We have to identify what that is and have some levels of resistance against it, because I don't want us to lose the information. But maybe, again, like I said, you don't throw up the food, right? You don't regurgitate it, but you actually metabolize it. We need to use it and use that information to make us stronger, to use it, so that, but we don't want it to calcify if we don't use it, because it's there. It's not going anywhere. So we have to use it. So I'm sorry, let me let you go. Let me let you.
So audience, family, disruptors, we're going to end it here. We thank you for coming along on the journey. Part 2 is healing trauma, choosing a new legacy. And based on what Dr. Robinson has talked about tonight, I don't even have to talk a lot about what choosing a new legacy is. I think you got it. And we expect you to be here next week, and tell all your friends. I'm going to invite Dr. Eve in. By the way, my name is Zawadi, because I forgot to introduce myself. I'm co-host of Wellness Wednesdays. And here is Dr. Eve. And she doesn't know that she's on mute. But
there she is. There she comes. Here she
Once
comes.
again, I have to just say thank you so much, Dr. DJ Robinson. That was spectacular, and I can't wait for next week.
All right. Me too.
Part 2. You know, the powerful truth is, what is passed down can be transformed, and that's why we're having these discussions, because we don't hear this enough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we understand that healing occurs when the nervous system learns safety, right? When the story is named, when the body is included in somatic work, when new financial, relational, and emotional skills are practiced. And so we want to bring to our community this type of information so that folks can have access and abilities to move forward, right? Because this is how families move from survival to sovereignty, right? Not by forgetting the past, but by metabolizing it. And so this is awesome. And I'm just going to be concluding by saying, we're taking a very holistic approach to wellness and financial well-being. So I hope folks that are new, please be sure to subscribe and join, visit our Instagram, because we have a powerhouse of a year coming up. We're developing new courses to help you build prosperity with confidence and clarity. We're developing a cyber education course to help you protect what you build. We have an expert-led summit coming up that we're also unwinding. So stay connected. There's a lot more to come. Amen. Thank you all for being here tonight. Zawadi for hosting.
Yes, thank you, Zawadi. You were a great host.
DJ Robinson, we will see you next week.
Next week, Wednesday.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell.
Yeah, hit the notification. Yeah.
And check out drdjrobinson.com.
Zawadi, I cannot hear you.
Oh.
I can.
That may be my sound.
Yeah, they can just go, if they go to drdjrobinson.com /blog, there's tons of, little markers that we'll probably touch on. So I'll try to put as many as, pre-reads that I can for your disruptors as I can. So I appreciate you. And I thank you both. And thank you, disruptors, for having me as a guest tonight. And I hope to see you all next week.
You are so welcome. Good night, all.